Click that subscribe button and the notification bell to never miss another scary story. And click that shop button below to check out my merchandise. Thanks. The barren trees sway in the icy wind. Snow crunches under frantic footsteps. You are lost. You haven't seen your family in 3 hours. Your lips crack with frozen dryness as your heart pounds desperately to warm you. Just when you think all is lost, a familiar voice calls from behind a tree. A voice that should be welcoming, but instead makes your veins run as cold as the night air. Because the voice that sounds like your mother's is coming from something that isn't even human anymore. These are 10 allegedly real sightings of the Wendigo. If you want your story on this channel, or just want to read thousands of scary true stories, go to darknessprevails.org and make an account today. Thank you. The Mulberry Bush by Alexandria G. This event occurred late July in 2017. It has left me completely certain that I may not be here now if this thing had decided it wanted me for dinner. To set the scene, I live in northern Illinois, a place where we are definitely not known for cryptids and supernatural happenings. I lived in a wonderful neighborhood that so happened to be on the edge of a lake and small forest area used for recreation. It's completely surrounded by city, which makes it the opposite of remote and mysterious. But let me tell you that that doesn't mean what lurks within it isn't dangerous. Part of the property is privately owned and fenced off from the rest of the lake. It's used as a dumping ground for small construction businesses around town, and as a playground for the owner's father, who presumably had dementia, to bulldoze rock piles to his heart's content. That specific area is where I've had the worst experiences of my life. I've seen and experienced some of the strangest things, but this experience takes the cake. One of my friends that goes by the name Angel lives directly across the street from that sectioned off property, and down the street from his apartment complex is a baseball diamond that's nestled next to the property quite literally. Where the diamond ends, the fence begins. One summer night, I was walking home from Angel's house. It was 10:30 p.m. when I left the apartment, and I was listening to Pamela Ford on repeat. It's a trivial detail, I know, but it shows you how ingrained into my memory this event became. Here's where the mulberry bush comes in. At the very end of the baseball diamond stands a massive mulberry bush that has attached itself to a tree of some sort to support its own weight. I always pick the berries during the summer to make pie and smoothies. I'm in love with that bush. But as I was nearing the plant, something was looming inside of it. My music was blasting, so I could not hear the silence that had consumed the cicadas and katydids and the entire neighborhood. But I paused my music for a moment so I could concentrate on peering through the dark at the bush. All I could make out was the general shape of the thing, who at the time I assumed was just part of the tree, until suddenly, with an audible pop, a motion sensor garage light on the house I was in front of came to life and illuminated the bush. The first thing that caught my attention were its eyes. They reflected with a greenish tint in the bright light of the garage, and they were about 11 feet off the ground, based on the branch I saw them next to. Then I looked the entire thing up and down from head to toe. Everything was so clear in the light, I could make out little cockaburs sticking to its fur in some spots. Its head was huge, but not cartoonish. This animal, if you'd call it that, was a carbon copy of a white-tailed buck, from the coloration to the facial features. The only things that allowed me to discern it from a deer was the fact that it was standing on its hind legs. Its antlers looked more like an elk's, and it had a mouth full of teeth that should have been found in a wolf's maw. Its canines protruded a good 2 inches below its upper lip. Its body was lean but muscular, definitely not emaciated as most skinwalker or Wendigo sightings tend to be, as I would later read. Its upright shoulders carried 2 ridiculously long arms that darn near reached its knees, with claws at the ends of fingers instead of hooves. Its torso was thin, but you could see clear muscle definition, and the way it slowly breathed as if trying to disguise itself as a statue. The legs were completely 100% deer, and the fur was the same coloration as a white-tailed deer, white underbelly, white tail and all. As I was trying to take it in, I realized that this thing was now staring straight at me, its reflective gaze zoned in on my 5-foot frame. The creature, as it stared at me, sidestepped out of the bush in its entirety and cocked its head to one side, maybe in simple curiosity, or maybe to size me up for a meal. Either way, it scared me plenty enough. Then, as if deciding whether or not I was worth the effort, it stepped back into the bush, and for about 30 seconds, it delicately moved from the foliage and slowly walked towards the fence of the private property, before clearing the fence with one swing of its legs. To put this into perspective, the chain link fence is 7 feet from bottom to top, and it seemed to just walk over it without a second thought. The one thing that really unnerved me about this was the silent snarl that it wore on its face as we stared at each other. Its black lips were curled up in what seemed like a permanent expression of anger, its pearly whites glinting in the garage light. What most people don't grasp is the fact that a true predator will never make a sound when it hunts. It's not like Jurassic Park, where the T-Rex is roaring every 2 seconds as it chases down the jeeps. No, if I hadn't seen it first, just by chance, right in the center of my neighborhood, I may never have seen it, whether it wanted to hurt me or not. That creature never made a sound. I urge you to be careful no matter where you live, and be aware of your surroundings, because if you're not aware, other hungrier things always are. Wendigo in the Woodland by Chris. I'm 15 years old. This happened about 6 or 7 months ago. To be honest, it's still kind of hard to talk about. I live in a rural town in Wisconsin, and I've always been fascinated by mythological creatures and the supernatural. So much so that one of my favorite pastimes is hunting for them. I have a couple of friends who usually accompany me in looking for haunts. You could call us a team. There was Alex, the tech guy, Josh the tracker, and me the team leader. Keep in mind that us being serious was the last thing on our minds. But when Josh told me that he had heard a story from his father about an odd creature that haunted the woods around town, we were more excited than ever. Josh is Native American, and his father has always tried to instill the culture of his people, with little success. But this time around, Josh was the first to suggest that we go looking for this creature, even though his father had forbidden us from searching for it. He didn't care though. We ended up going on this expedition regardless, without telling any of our parents what we were actually doing. It was 11:30 that night when I met up with the group outside the woods. Alex brought the flashlights, the radios, and the cameras. Josh brought the first aid kit in case we got hurt, rope and firecrackers as makeshift signal flares, though we often resorted to just playing around with them. I brought some knives for cutting through the rather thick underbrush, the water and the breakfast bars, 4 for each of us. I'll skip the looking and false scares because there were a lot that night. Something about it made us on edge. About an hour or two later, we found an odd marking in one of the trees. 4 long scratches straight down. At first, I thought it was a bear mark or something, but I noticed that it was much too thin. Then again, I reminded myself I wasn't really nature savvy, so I didn't put too much weight into it. We ended up going about as deep into the woods as you could get. That is where we saw something that will forever creep us out. Still warm, red liquid. There was so much all over the place it looked like a crime scene. Josh thought maybe it was from a deer, but I didn't agree. It was just too weird. It was more like something had been tossed all over the place, not simply tracked down and hunted. I can't quite describe it. I just had this static sensation under my skin and up my spine. Everything was telling me we needed to get out of there, but my curiosity suppressed all those feelings. Alex was staring at the red, like he was in some sort of trance. I think he may have been more shocked than the rest of us. Suddenly, we all heard a loud, ear-rupturing screech, mixed with a scream or roar. It sounded nothing less than unnatural. We all came very close to screaming. For some reason, I just shut off my flashlight, and I told the others to do the same. Then, we saw something. 2 glowing lights in the woods. It took a few seconds for my eyes to adjust, but when they did, I immediately wished they hadn't. I saw what looked like a man, but incredibly skinny and tall, like 6 or 7 feet tall, with a snout that was elongated. I always thought of myself as a very calm and collected person, but when I looked at what it was holding in its long, pointy fingers, I came seconds from screaming once again. It looked like an arm, a human arm. I told my friends to get down slowly. It seemed like hours passed as we watched that thing slowly make its way over to and eventually past us. The entire time it was sniffing in the air, mouth watering, like it smelled a freshly cooked pizza. Then my heart stopped as the creature stood still for a moment and turned back in our direction. It walked right in front of where we were hiding. It stopped again when we suddenly heard another noise coming from it, a gentler, yet far more terrifying noise. It was the voice of a young girl.
"Please, someone help me. I'm lost."
It spoke in an almost perfect human imitation. Panicking, I took out one of the pocket knives and I jabbed it right in its heel. The moment I did, it roared again. As the 3 of us took off running for our lives. We must have covered 100 yards in only a few seconds, but we ran and ran and ran until we couldn't run anymore. By then, we all collectively realized that we may be screwed. We heard the cracking and smashing of sticks coming to us, so we hid behind some of the trees. By the grace of God or something, the thing ran right past us. But we sat there for 20 minutes more before finally getting the courage to run off in the general direction of where we came from. We were trying to be as quiet as possible, yet as fast as possible, before making it to my house and running straight up to my room and locking the doors and windows. We lay there for some time, just thinking in silence about what we saw. The other guys slept over, too afraid to go back to their own houses because that would mean going back outside, and outside was where that thing was. We've never gone within a 3-mile radius of those woods again, but sometimes I still get that static feeling under my skin at home. And now, whenever that happens, I always close my window and find something to protect myself with. Just writing this scares the devil out of me. Wendigo by Harley. I'd like to first say that I didn't find out what this actually was until I turned 12 and listened to a few stories online. Stories that matched my own. I was 7 when it happened, out back at my auntie's house. Out there is a trail that leads deep into the mountains. It was on an occasion my Uncle Jared had decided to take us out walking on those trails to explore a little bit. About 20 to 30 minutes into the trail, we hear the trees rattling. This is rural Canada, so wind coming through the mountains isn't rare. But something was off about this. We decided to truck on, not paying much mind to the weird wind. After a little while longer, Jared points out something in the tree line about 10 meters away. I turned toward the tree line and saw antlers poking out from behind one of the trees. Being young and ignorant at the time, I said as quietly as a 70-year-old could get, excitedly, "Look, a deer." But my uncle did not feel the same. And now I realize why. Looking back on it, a deer's head coming from 8 feet off the ground from behind a tree, with eyes more akin to a predatory cat, that wasn't normal. He grabbed me by the arm, and we began to run back. As I heard the thing coming out of the tree line behind the tree, I turned to look back, seeing a creature with a strange posture and an appearance between a deer and frog ran perpendicular to us along the tree line. After about 10 minutes of running, I was entirely winded, but we continued going until we made it back to the trailer. Once there, my uncle said not to tell my parents. They would get mad at him and not trust me with him anymore. Not to mention he knew that they wouldn't believe our little story. He said if anyone asked, we were just spooked by wildlife or maybe a homeless person. But even at that age, I knew that thing was the furthest thing from human. I still tell this story to my friends, and none of them believe me. You don't have to either. But I'll always look back on this odd experience with fear and curiosity. The Thing in My Crawlspace by Erik K. I live in Canada, in one of the most citied areas. On either side of my street, there is a line of houses, each containing 10 or 12 homes. My house sits on a bit of a hill and has a lot of windows, maybe a tad too many. Now, my house has 3 levels, all having about 12 stairs to climb to get up there. My room was on the 3rd floor, and it makes me feel somewhat safer being off the ground. But my room does have a crawl space that takes up one of the corners of my room, and on the other side of my door, there's a 4 to 5 meter hallway that leads to my parents' room. I was 12 years old at the time, so this experience was especially terrifying to my young mind. One weekend, my parents were going out, and of course I asked if I could stay home. I was big into Fortnite and wanted to play some. They said okay, so I went on up to my room after they left, and I played for about an hour. It was then that I was interrupted by an odd sound. Like a loud metal on metal sound. I turned to my window, and just in a nick of time, I see in the spotlight of the street lamp something darting across the yard in front of us. I thought it was a raccoon at the time. Everyone had their garbage cans out for the trash truck tomorrow, so I didn't think much of it. but I did call my mom to let her know what I saw. She laughed and said to make sure the dogs were inside. So I ran downstairs to let them in. While I was walking back upstairs, I heard the same metal on metal sound. This time much closer. I brought the dogs upstairs and locked them in my room as I was beginning to feel uneasy. I put my headset back on, but as I do, I hear a loud thump that makes me and even the dogs jump. I yanked my headphones off and listened for a moment, but I did not hear anything else for a while. So I decided to turn on a movie instead and try to get some sleep. But first, I let my dogs out of my room. They were snoring way too loud for me to sleep. This was something I would quickly regret. While dozing off, I heard the sound that was like a dog trying to become comfortable, like nails on wood. I was confused because the dogs were in my parents' room now, and that was a bit too far away, and there were too many walls to hear it that clearly. This put me on edge. Then I began to hear a creaky metal sound, like a squeaky hinge on an old door, followed by an intense feeling of dread overwhelming me. I slowly turned my head to my closet, but I saw nothing. Then I turned my head to the left, and my heart sank. There, my crawlspace door was slightly open. I wanted to force myself to get up, but I was too scared to move. Then, I saw a dinner plate-sized hand reaching towards my face. I was able to scream now. The hand pulled away, and I broke out of this trance I was in. I ran to the door and went to get my dogs, sweating and crying at the same time. When I found the dogs, I saw that they were cowering. I looked back down the hallway to see a pale figure in my room. It scuttered away before I could make out full detail. Before I knew it, there was something racing out of my window, and I saw a shadow darting across the street, similar to before. I waited for my parents to come home. Then I cried in their arms as they denied and denied again my story. Ever since that night, I've kept a kitchen knife at my bedside, just in case it comes back. And I've also sealed that door shut with tape, glue, nails, everything I could get my hands on, because I do not want it back in my room. Because who knows, next time I may be asleep, and I may not be awake to run away and save my own life. Oklahoma Plains, Wendigo by Hunter C. It was a normal drive home from the oil fields until I saw it. Something that I've never seen before on or off the road. Keep in mind that the road I was driving on is not used very often. I saw a row of deer carcasses lined up across the road. Something told me that I needed to get out of that place to turn my vehicle around. But before I could, I saw something totally inhuman standing right there by my driver's side door. Something with a head like a deer's skull. My heart was pounding so fast, it was all I could hear. I thought I was going to pass out from fear. It let out a scream unlike anything I've ever heard before. I froze, doing everything in my power to try to move again, as it took another step toward my vehicle. The creature was huge, standing at about 8 feet tall, easily towering over my small truck. It started to sniff the air. I honestly thought this was it for me. I slowly reached for my back pocket. My key fob had an alarm button, and it would play whether my truck was started or not. The moment I pressed the button, it spooked the creature, and it sprinted away at an unnatural speed. I floored the gas. I've never driven so recklessly before. I went at a top speed of 95 miles per hour, and this was on some back road. I'm surprised I didn't crash. When I saw the end of the road leading to the highway, I felt so relieved. It's been 3 years since the incident, and I always get the feeling that something is watching me when I'm driving out there. It's part of the job, and I just hope it doesn't come back. My Experience in Algonquin National Park by Erik. I was taking a school trip with about half of my grade through the forests of Algonquin National Park. It's a huge provincial park where you're surrounded by water and trees and pretty much nothing else. The wildlife there flourished, and everything is secluded from our present society. In other words, there's no signal on your cell phone for the most part, no buildings, no nothing. We stayed there for a week with 2 guides and 6 other guys my age. The first day was great. We got to this camp that my school was hosting. I remember the lake water and trees and the beautiful cabins that we slept in for the night. Nothing too interesting happened that day. We got there and set up for the week. When we woke up, we headed down to the main lodge for breakfast and then set off for the water. On our second full day there, we were canoeing. I think we were doing it for about 5 or 6 hours. I didn't have a phone or watch with me, so I had to use the sun to guess. By the time we found a nice spot to sleep for the night, it was really dark. We set up our tents and got ready for dinner. On my way through the forest looking for twigs and branches for kindling, I spotted the most curious-looking animal. It stood like a person, but had the hide of a deer, and the head of it was like a wolf and deer mixed together. The moment I saw it, my body kicked into some primal fear mode. I stayed absolutely still, and my breathing went so quiet that I couldn't even feel or hear it. I was alone in the woods with this thing, my camp a few minutes away. I heard a snap of a twig, making me nearly jump. My head darted in that direction, and when I didn't see anything, I quickly turned back to this abomination before me, but it was gone. Quickly, I took the opportunity to run back. I was twigless when I came back, and my guides asked why I hadn't gathered anything. I quietly told them that I couldn't really find much good kindling, and that I wanted to help them start the fire instead. They looked at me funny but consented. About 2 days later, we were canoeing again. We did a portage and then canoed and portaged again, repeating the process until we came upon a mother moose and her baby drinking in the water. They were beautiful but intimidating. All of a sudden, I was overwhelmed with this feeling of terror. I was worried. I began to scan the forest around us, and I spotted the thing I'd seen before just 2 nights ago. I didn't know what it was, but just having it around me, it made me feel like my world was coming crashing down. My group started to shout at the moose to get them to move. We were in the water, so we should have been safe from any moose attacks. And luckily, the mother moose and baby got the idea. They turned and disappeared into the forest. By the time we reached the shore, the creature had disappeared as well, though I was left horrified at the idea of being in the woods again with that thing. That night, we were roasting marshmallows, the stereotypical camping trip snack. My throat got dry all of a sudden, so I went over to my tent to get some water. And a few minutes later, we went to bed. About 3 hours after that, I woke up, quickly regretting all the water I had drank. It must have been about 1 in the morning if I had to guess. I found myself a nice little spot to relieve myself. I didn't bring a flashlight, but it was okay because the moon was shining brightly in the sky. That was when, once again, the dreadful feeling came over me, as goosebumps sprouted all over my skin. Something about the dark had always freaked me out, but this was different. This was like my body knowing it wasn't alone anymore. It knew I was in danger. I felt this sudden urge to turn around, and soon I did. I saw the creature again, standing on 2 legs. It was closer than ever before, really giving me an idea of how big it was. Its eyes reflected yellow in the moonlight, and it was bony below its neck. And to be real with you, it looked like it had passed away a long time ago. It was more like a walking corpse than a living thing. I screamed, but all that came out was air, no sound. And then I ran back to my tent and hid under a blanket. Somehow I fell back asleep, because the next thing I knew, it was bright out, and we were getting ready to leave the area. Luckily for me, it was the last time I'd see that Wendigo again. Nighttime Tapping by X.O. Drahas. I'm 14. My family is Amish, and lately I've been having these experiences. It's been happening for a year now. I've seen this thing once, and I believe or hope that it was a dream. But for a dream, it's far too real and vivid. It began a month after we moved into a new house. One night when I was lying in bed, playing on my phone, and yes, some Amish do use phones, when I suddenly heard 2 light taps on a window beside my bed. I froze, afraid to look, and after a few moments when I turned, I saw nothing there. A year after that, I had forgotten about that night, and I have moved into a different room. These experiences last for the course of 3 or 4 months. I would be lying in bed reading a book or minding my own business when I'd hear a thump thump tap tap tapping sound on the window, facing the foot of my bed. Once again I would freeze in terror, and after a minute or 2 the thumps would go away. This really stressed me out, filling me with insane amounts of terror every time it happened. But then a particular night rolled around. As usual, I hear the tapping and look out my window, as had become my routine. But this time, I see something. I see the thing that I'm certain has caused all the tapping. It's a white, hairless thing with black pits for eyes and pale, human-like body. It's staring at me, crawling on all 4s in the ground. Every time I blinked, it had scuttered to a different place quickly, until it disappeared in the distance. For some reason, I wasn't as terrified as I usually was. Instead, I felt mystified, and I quickly fell back to sleep. It's now February of 2018 as I'm writing this, and I've moved into a new room. But over the past month, the tapping has continued every now and then. And I'm not alone in this anymore, because a friend of mine has reported to me that she had seen something jump off of a street lamp and scurry away. They even heard something stomping around in the loft of their uncle's barn, and just a couple of days ago, they also heard something tapping on their window. These things are still happening, and I'm planning on trying to get a photo. If you don't hear from me, let's hope the worst didn't happen. Rake or Wendigo in the Woods by Foira. I was in the 2nd grade, and it was way past my curfew. My friend Jameson and I were out that night exploring the woods a couple of blocks away from our houses. It was quiet and warm out that night, and it was very comfortable. But it was a little bit too quiet, really. Usually in our neighborhood, you would hear frogs and crickets at night, but not that night. It was so weird, it was like some strange phenomenon. Anyway, it was a Friday night and we were a couple of little kids. We had walked into the woods, and the minute we stepped into them, I immediately felt like something was watching me. "Hey, Jameson, do you feel that?" "Stop, Jamie," he replied. "Stop trying to freak me out." I rolled my eyes and began to scan the woods around us. There was absolutely nothing there, so why we were feeling this way, I didn't know. I tried to talk Jameson into leaving with me, but he said no. I didn't want to stay anymore, but I was certainly not going back by myself. We continued walking until we soon came upon a clearing. I scanned the tree line a little bit, and that's when I saw something weird. There was a gray, thin figure, hunched over. Its arms and legs were like twigs, they were so bony. It looked like someone who hadn't eaten for months, more like bones on top of skin. I could see its ribs even from behind. Jameson must have noticed it as well, but as he stepped over to stand next to me, he stepped on a twig, which snapped, causing the thing to turn and look at us. Its eyes were more like pits in its face. We screamed and ran in the opposite direction, straight towards home. It didn't follow us, but that didn't matter. We still ran like there was no tomorrow. This is something that has been seared into my memory, and me and Jamesons want to go back out into those woods at night to see it again. Call us crazy, but that's just how we are. That night will definitely haunt me forever. I own a Tesla, and I regret it now. By Anonymous. Has anyone ever experienced something weird on a road trip? Because I have a story to share with you, back when me and my girlfriend were still together. We had decided to go towards Illinois for the week, since my boss had gotten into an accident and wouldn't be out of the hospital until next Sunday. Like usual on a road trip, we packed our stuff into the Tesla. Bear in mind it was a used one. We didn't get on the road until about 8 p.m. By the time we were on the interstate highway, there wasn't a single light on the road or any other car headlight to be seen. So, like any person would, I decided to switch my autopilot on. Sure, I don't entirely trust the feature yet. It's a little bit sketchy to me. But after a while of monitoring it on the road, I was consumed by my phone, playing mobile games. Suddenly, I hear that chime that the Tesla plays when there's something in front of the car. It quickly slams the brakes on. By then, I'm thinking it was a deer or something walking out into the middle of the road. But as I stare out over the dashboard, I don't see anything. Maybe a malfunction, I thought. I re-engaged the autopilot, thinking that it was just an animal who had already passed on the road when I looked up. I began playing more mobile games until I hear the same freaking chime. I look in the road and there's nothing again. This time I start driving on my own. I'm beginning to think it's something with the autopilot. Then the car suddenly just turns off. I put it in neutral and push the car to the side. But something catches my eye. In the distance, I can make out a silhouette of a figure with arms and legs contorted in weird ways. I call out, "Hello? Are you okay?" Of course, just assuming it's a person. When they're close enough, the figure lunges towards the car at an extremely sudden and rapid speed. Whatever it is clawing at the side of the car, trying to get inside, and even chips the glass a bit. Suddenly, my girlfriend must have woke up, because she screams loud enough to scare the thing and cause it to run away into the darkness. I manage to get the car started, and I drive as fast as I can away from that area, not putting it back on autopilot, because I did not want to be stopped again, not until I saw daylight or we had a place to stay. What in the world we saw that night, I have no idea. And it makes me a bit irritated that my Tesla almost got us attacked. The Thing in the Woods by Anonymous. To begin, my friend is letting me write this story for her. She said it's helping her get a laugh off of her chest, and this story has to do with her. Me and Opal, my best friend, were going camping for the weekend, and from the start she was not having fun. She was having a lot of panic attacks, as her boyfriend had recently left her. to go into the army, and she felt scared for him. I thought I could help her feel better, so we left right after work one day to try to enjoy ourselves. The first day was fine, but she couldn't sleep. She never does sleep that much anyway. I, on the other hand, was exhausted and passed out pretty quickly. The following 2 days were when it started to get bad. Opal wanted to go into town to call her mom and tell her how the trip was going. The sun had been setting, and by the time we got halfway, Opal suddenly screamed. I didn't see that I had almost hit a deer, but we didn't stop until getting to town. She stayed in the car, and I went in for gas and to let her get some privacy while she was on the phone. Outside the car, it smelled really bad. Not thinking much about it, I simply walked back to the car when I had gotten the gas. She was crying on the phone, and as I stepped inside, she hung up and acted like everything was fine again. I didn't ask, worrying that it wasn't any of my business. We headed back to camp, and along the way I could hear a clicking sound. I thought it was my car. It was a crap car after all. I asked her to turn the music down so I could hear it better. She did, and I realized it wasn't the car. It sounded more like the sound of a little kid would make when you tick them off. I stopped the car and got out. Now the smell had followed us somehow, and it was worse than ever. There was this sound coming from all around us, and Opal could hear it too. She got out of the car. We looked around for the source of the smell but could not find it. We got back on the road. Not long after that, Opal nearly yanked the wheel out of my hand. I slammed on the brakes. Turns out there was something in the road that I almost didn't see, and it looked like the same deer as before, but now I had gotten a better look at it. This was no deer. There was red all over it, chunks of meat missing, and flies swarming about it. Suddenly it charged at us. The thing rammed into the car, pushing it back a few feet with force. Opal screamed as the battery went out in the car, and I tried to get it started again. The creature was in front of us, making that clicking sound, before it suddenly stopped and simply walked away into the woods like nothing ever happened. We gunned it back to camp, packed up for the night, and left back home. There was something wrong with those woods, and I don't think it would have been safe to stay out there. Even back home, I didn't feel as alone as I should have been. The Wendigo is a vicious spirit that possesses humans and changes them into a ravenous, starving creature, one that can only hunger for human flesh. And even better, it is cursed to never be satisfied, no matter how much it feasts. So the next time you're in the woods, beware of its different shapes and its different ploys. It may look like a pale human, or it may wear the skeletal remains of a deer, but there's no doubt that all it wants to do is attack any human on sight. You've been warned. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Don't forget, you can send me your stories at darknessprevails.org, but you've got to create an account first. If you want to support my channel further, go to patreon.com/darknessprevails. By donating any amount, you'll receive credits at the end of these videos for as long as you donate, and you'll unlock access to ad-free MP3 downloads at Patreon. Or you could click that shop button below and get some creepy cool Darkness Prevails merchandise well before Christmas time comes around. Now, as usual, here are my 5 favorite early comments from the previous full episode about 10 real dogman sightings. Nick Rolls says, Wendigo's won though. He's talking about the poll I took over dogman or Wendigo stories. Well, I wanted to do both, and since a number of people complained that I do too many Wendigo stories, I decided to touch back on dogman first, but I always retouch on the classic monsters, so no worries. Kane7ify says, bad dogman, bad. I don't think a squirt bottle's gonna do any good if your dogman completely devours your couch. I'm surprised we haven't bred our dogs into a dog-man-like creature yet. Just look how freaking mutated some of those dogs are. Those poor pugs. Kate McGinty says, saw a dogman at Walmart last weekend. Oh, you must have saw that episode of People of Walmart as well. Yuck. Keenan Chicoine says, man, I haven't been keeping up with your videos. I gotta catch up. Well, the more you miss, the more you'll have to watch. So get ready for one creepy binge. And X-Fresh Kate says, dogmen are my personal favorite cryptids. Bless up. Mine too. And because they're nearly the same as werewolves, I can't get enough of both. You know what they say, man's best enemy. Anyways guys, thanks so much for tuning in to another Darkness Prevails episode. More scary stories are coming soon, so stay tuned. Until next time, here are the credits to my patrons who continue to donate like awesome people. A huge thanks goes out to them. Remember, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.